folks. So today we are going to talk about some of the major personality disorders. I'm going to kind of go through these kind of like just a basic list. I encourage you to read more detail in the book, as well as kind of explore. I will have hopefully gathered enough good YouTube video examples. Oops, excuse me. Can I? Oh, there we go. Now we're in frame. On the main camera. Not so much the backup camera. But that's okay. Hopefully the main camera works. Sorry, I'm a little frazzled because I just had to reboot all my computers to get this to work. So hopefully it does. If not, that means likely I will have used this as the preamble and said, welcome to the COVID edition of this lecture, and then just cut to the ones I did last year. So hopefully I don't do that. Okay, let's just try. Okay, come on. There we go. Cool. So, had to adjust the lighting because I do usually record this late in the day. Okay, so here we go. So first, schizotypal personality disorder. It's characterized by an extreme pattern of odd beliefs and behaviors, as well as difficulties relating to others. So this isn't just like, oh, you had this one idea about how lizard people are like the queen and whatnot. This is like all the lizard people. Like it's not exactly, I mean, it's not like conspiratorial thinking, but that's how I kind of help conceptualize it. So these like extreme kind of odd patterns include both odd thoughts, strange ideas, unconventional behavior, superstitious belief, as well as difficulty in close relationships. In schizotypal personality disorder, it's not like a dude who's called schizotypal. It's similar to schizophrenia. At its extreme, it's not the same as schizophrenia, but there seem to be some common genetic aspects to it that both people with so using behavior genetic studies, we find that people are more likely, like that there's at least some heritable component. It's hard to do these kinds of studies, but that's my sense. Now, in terms of prevalence, so this is the proportion of the population that has this diagnosis. It ranges depending on the study, frankly, in the country, from 0.6%, so that's less than, so that's like 6 in 1,000, up to 4 and a little more than 4.5%, or like 9 out of 200. To give you some sense of what those fractions mean. It's probably like the small side is probably like an undercount, and the large side is probably an overcount. But it's rare, but not like unheard of. Okay. Hopefully that will signal to me that I need to do some editing. So narcissistic personality disorder is an extreme pattern of arrogant, exploitative behavior, and that pattern is combined with a notable lack of empathy towards other people. This tends to be characterized by a belief that one is superior to others, even in the face of overwhelming evidence that they're not the best at everything. It's like the evidence just isn't part of the equation. They know that they're the best, they're the most superior, and any evidence that they have to the contrary is biased against them. It's either like some conspiracy, or they just like don't acknowledge it. There's lots of but the idea is that they believe that they are like superior to all, and it doesn't matter what the evidence says. Now, there's often an expectation of special treatment and a feeling of entitlement. Now, this, like essentially that They don't think that rules apply to them, and they feel justified in taking advantage of others. Some kind of classic examples are, now these are diagnosed after the fact. It's not like the like Hitler's psychiatrist was like, you have a personality disorder. No, most of these diagnoses come, like the CIA actually has some really cool documents. And they hire personality psychologists on occasion to like do these kinds of like diagnoses, or like they tend to be like hybrid clinical and personality psychologists to make these diagnoses. There's actually this idea called the Goldwater Rule, where you're not supposed to diagnose people who aren't your patients. You're not supposed to diagnose public figures. So, and there's debate on this Goldwater Rule. You'll have noticed that in current events, it's very rare for medical professionals, clinical psychiatrists, psychologists to diagnose public figures, and it's because of this Goldwater Rule. So, but let me keep going, because I know we all got other places to be. So they feel justified in taking advantage of others because they're better. So why not? Rules don't apply to them. Rules are for other people. For people who are just like not me, is the idea. And frankly, this is really difficult or frankly impossible to treat. Just because it's so egocentric, like, and with most treatments, you have to like want to change. I mean, no, with all treatments, you have to want to change. It's the same with any personality change. You have to want to do it because it's hard. So if you don't see a problem with yourself, you're not going to change. And in terms of prevalence, up to 62% of the population could have this. It's kind of, I mean, that's probably an overestimate, but these are kind of rare. That's about 1 in 20. So these percentages I always have a hard time with, because like 6% seems like a lot for a personality disorder. Like just one personality disorder. But this is what the literature says. I am not someone who does this kind of research to estimate prevalences of disorder, so I trust the people, trust the peer review process. It just, personally, it seems high. But that's what the literature says, so I have no evidence to the contrary other than that, like, gut feeling. So disregard that gut feeling. And if you can find cool evidence, please share it. But in general, it's up to 62%. Or up to 6.2. 6.2. 6 out of 100. Not 62 out of 100. Okay. Antisocial personality disorder is essentially an extreme pattern of deceitful, manipulative, and sometimes dangerous behavior. It's characterized by illegal activities such as vandalism, theft, drug dealing. It's associated with impulsive and risky behaviors such as reckless driving, drug abuse, dangerous sexual practices, like not wearing a condom or things like that. Saying you don't have an STD when you actually do. It's more common in men. It causes problems for others. I mean, when you're like robbed and stuff is taken from you, obviously the other people, like the people who have been stolen from or have been put at risk for risky sexual behaviors, are, the ones with a problem. It's not the person committing the antisocial behaviors. Ted Bundy is kind of a classic example of this. Most serial killers probably fall in this bucket. It's rarer, between 0.2% and 3 in a third. So between 2 in 1,000 to 33 in 1,000. It's way more common in men. It seems to be associated with low SES and urban settings. And I'll talk more about this in the next chunk. But there are some big controversies with antisocial personality disorder. First of all, you can't be diagnosed under the age of 18 just because of the labeling issue associated with it. It's, I think, called like operant defiant disorder in kids, because essentially some people really argue that you have pathologized criminal behavior. And like the fact that it's associated with low SES, as well as like more prevalent in urban settings where crime is higher, makes me hesitant about this disorder. Again, I'm not a clinical personality disorder person. Like, this is not my like area of specialty, but it does make me hesitant because there are other disorders that seem to be way more prevalent in different regions. My go-to example, and now this is not a personality disorder, but just to like help you understand where my hesitation comes from. In undergrad, I did a research project for my clinical psych class where I looked at sluggish schizophrenia, which is like, for those of you who haven't taken clinical psych, it's schizophrenia but with only negative symptoms. So no like paranoid delusions, no stuff that like is an addition to what is typical. Instead, it's just an absence. And this disorder was only diagnosed in the Soviet Union, and one of the biggest criteria was not fitting in with society. And so this diagnosis was applied to political dissidents a lot. And to this day, we still have way higher rates of schizophrenia diagnosis, including sluggish schizophrenia, in the former Soviet Union, even though these people clearly did not have like a psychiatric, like they didn't have schizophrenia. They were just not communists. I mean, and yet it's still like there's still higher rates diagnosed today. So that's where I think a lot of my hesitancy comes from. Again, like, regardless, the diagnosis exists. It differs by region and seems to be associated with low SES. Now, a lot of mental illness is associated with low SES. I have a whole research paper on this. But still, it always makes me hesitate. Okay, next. Borderline personality disorder. So this is it's like the most severe of the personality disorders. So severe. It's an extreme and sometimes dangerous pattern of emotional instability. There's a lot of emotional emptiness associated with this, confusion in terms of identity, and a tendency toward self-harm. It's more common in women, but it does occur in men. It does. So visit me during office hours if you want to hear all about my experience with someone with borderline. It's an experience that I don't wish on anyone. So the hallmark symptom, like, if you only could pick one thing, just like with antisocial, it's like crime. And with schizotypal, it's like bizarre thinking. Borderline is all about emotional instability. Often these emotions cannot be stopped. They just like run rampant. And suicide attempts are really common with this disorder. Self-mutilation also. Part of it seems to be maybe trying to give some sense of control with cutting, typically. And there's a lot of identity disturbance. People with borderline tend to not know who they are in terms of like their values, their goals, even their sexual identity, or even how they appear to others. Often they don't understand their own behaviors and will just kind of, I don't even know how to articulate this. they will almost reinterpret past events to explain their current, like, unstable, like, they reinterpret, and there's this, essentially this is to try and understand, and this is partially due to this phenomenon called splitting, where people are seen as, like, either all good or all bad, and it leads to interpersonal relationships that are confusing, chaotic, noisy, unpredictable, unstable. They are hella stressful. So stressful. So either you're, for example, you could be viewed as, like, the best person ever, their person, and they will, like, lean on you heavily, and, like, your opinion is, like, all that matters to them, or you are the worst person ever, and, like, are clearly out to get them. Sorry, I don't mean to unload, but if anyone has had a relationship, or even, like, not even like a romantic, an interpersonal, any kind of professional relationship, it takes its toll. Now, I do have some good news, that, it is treatable, but only if you want, like, so this disorder is treatable, for the, like, at least it's the most successful in being treated, possibly because, all the other disorders are, tend to, like, not be as distressful on the individual person. There's, in terms of, like, and so, like, dialectic behavioral therapy essentially teaches skills for emotional self-control, and to just, like, try and help teach people how to regulate their own emotions. They're just, now, backing up, in terms of, like, possible origins, there seem to be genetic risk factors, combined with early family environments, and in these early family environments, typically the children aren't, like, taught how to understand and regulate their emotions. There might be some relationship with the endogenous opioid system that regulates kind of natural painkillers. I'm not very familiar with how the link, but there seems to be some literature to support this. But it's usually a mix of, you have to have the genetic predisposition as well as some kind of environmental challenges. Either, like, you didn't learn how to regulate, or you came from an abusive home. And, like, that's not to say that everyone who comes from an abusive home... Excuse me. Hey, Google! Quiet! Okay. Sorry about that. But that's not to say that everyone who comes from an abusive home is gonna have borderline, but they seem to be associated. Now, in terms of prevalence, about 2% of the population has some kind of diagnosis of this disorder. It is way more commonly diagnosed in women, but that doesn't mean that men can't have it. And if anything, men's experiences with this, or expression of this, can differ. And, but, it exists. And I can tell you that it sucks for everyone in their lives. But primarily for the person with borderline. It is not it sucks, and I'm very empathetic. Okay, avoidant personality disorder. This is the top result from Google. I am using this as fair use to illustrate how the stereotypes of avoidant personality disorder get expressed. Hopefully that will be acceptable. If not, this image may be blurred out so that I can present this on the YouTube. So avoidant personality disorder is a fear of failure, of criticism or rejection, and this leads to the avoidance of normal activities. In general, people with this disorder expect the absolute worst from others, criticism, contempt, and rejection, and yet they still deeply crave for affection and social acceptance. But they inhibit their own emotional expression towards others, and others can in general just not tend to get close to them. Now, this is not the same as like the avoidant attachment style. That's like environment. That's more like a childhood upbringing thing. But you can think of avoidant personality disorder like the super duper extreme version of avoidant attachment. The prevalence is about the same for men and women. It's about 2.4 is what I have in my notes. So that's like 2.5. That's like 5 out of 200. Yeah. And let's see, I've got a slip. Nope, that's just an activity. And in general, they just have this really deep craving for affection and social acceptance, and yet they can't let themselves open up at all. Okay. Ta-da! Animations. So this was a top image result of Google. Again, I do not own the copyright to this, so hopefully you can see it. If not, you can Google it. Okay, so we've got obsessive compulsive personality disorder. This is not the same as obsessive compulsive disorder, but I'll talk about that first a little bit later. This is an extreme pattern of rigidly conscientious behavior, like super extreme conscientiousness, including anxious and inflexible adherence to rules and rituals, perfectionism, stubborn resistance to change. Usually there's a lack of a sense of proportion, so they're unable to determine when rules don't apply or when details are not important. So, like, there's just no wiggle room in rules, like, at all. If it is a rule, it must be followed. There seems to be some association with workaholism, tend to work longer hours, but don't actually get anything done. Essentially, you're really inefficient because you have to follow every single rule instead of like what? Ooh, excuse me. And there's also there's a little bit of a hoarding tendency with this too. So an inability to throw things away. It doesn't mean that if you if you are really good at coming up with reasons why you might need something later, that's not a personality disorder. So if you hoard a little, but you don't have the rest of these, like, I definitely am guilty of, like, not throwing stuff out or, like, giving it away and be like, because I might need it. And I never really need it. No one needs as many iPhone cables as I have. I don't even have an iPhone anymore. So, but I might need it. That's not the same as a personality disorder. Like, it's different. Like, because my hoardiness doesn't actually impact my ability to live a relatively functional life. And because rules are meant to be bent. They're more like guidelines. So that's like, I'm trying to highlight that you can have some of these characteristics, but personality disorders are, like, really extreme, almost caricatures of personality traits. So, like, yeah. So I have in my notes here, inability to throw things away. They think they might need it later. But, like, there's just, I mean, we're talking stuff that is, like, broken, things like, okay. I also have a collection of broken computer things, because I raid them for parts, but I actually do raid them for parts. So it's different, I swear. Now, this is not the same as obsessive compulsive disorder, because, obsessive compulsive disorder is less severe. It's less severe because, sorry, my notes make this so unclear to read. Why would I write it this way? Okay, let me turn that into English. So it's not the same as the disorder. The personality disorder is less severe because it is not associated with specific compulsions. But the personality disorder may affect more areas of life and be harder to treat. This is one of the most common of the personality disorders, with prevalence between 2 and almost 8% of the population. And so the personality disorder is more broad encompassing. It's more like systematic and consistent with all of this stuff. But it's also harder to treat because it's like part of your personality. Okay. Cool. So next time we're going to talk about how to apply some structure to these personality disorders. We're going to order the personality disorder. And we'll see if I can summon some cats next time, because they're floating around, and I know we haven't gotten a ton of cat sightings this last third of the lecture because I've been recording some at my office, which is cat-free, versus at home where I am right now. So thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.